Hello out there, and welcome back to the GamecockScoop.com podcast, the official podcast of GamecockScoop.com on Rivals. I'm Caleb, joined by Alan. We got a lot to get to today. We'll start with a little football, go through the last week or so for both the men and women's basketball teams, and then there's a pretty big series starting tomorrow for the baseball team, I heard. It's your last chance, I guess, of the major sports to get a win against the rival Clemson Tigers. That's always a fun series. We'll see if the weather plays nice with us.
Hopefully a big series starts tomorrow.
Yeah. So as we start to look at some of the stuff, just a really quick reminder, if you don't follow us on Instagram or wherever you don't follow us, we're at Rivals Gamecock, and we're actually going to do a giveaway in the next few days to give a 1-year premium membership away. And one of the requirements is that you follow us on Instagram. So if you don't do that, now's a good time to do that. If you do that, look out for that giveaway in the next few days. Anyway, so the big news on the football front is you got kind of rope-a-doped. There was an ESPN headline that popped up on my phone this morning that was like, South Carolina has third different wide receiver coach since December. I was like, well, that's
technically true.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's not the most fun way to word it, but technically true. And so, yeah, if you've been hiding under a rock for the last week, this happened after we podcasted last week. James Coley, who we were lauding as a pretty good hire for Shane Beamer this offseason. We talked about the pros and cons because it ultimately ran Justin Stepp into a different situation. Well, he decided he was going to join Georgia's staff last Friday. We can talk a little bit about that, but let me go ahead and lay out the whole picture. There was a pretty quick turnaround in the coaching search, and as of this morning, Mike Furry is how we decided it goes, from Limestone, but also spent several years in the NFL as a wide receivers coach, is joining South Carolina's staff as of this morning. We'll go a little bit more further into him too, but let's start with this James Coley stuff since we didn't have a chance to talk about it. I know you and I were texting back and forth right after it happened, and you mentioned that you didn't think it was a very good look, I guess.
No, it's not. I mean, I don't think there's really any way around it. It's not entirely South Carolina's fault. The staff, there's an opening at Georgia that comes from, Del McGee left, or I think they had 2 openings, but either way, it's not entirely South Carolina's fault, but either way, you stick your neck out to hire a guy. You have to shuffle your current staff to get that guy through the door, as in you shuffle Justin Stepp from receivers to tight ends because you want Coley coaching the receivers. And not only does James Coley not coach a season, not coach part of a season, doesn't even coach a practice in South Carolina. He's out in 43 days. We're still 20 days from spring ball as of today. It's really, it's tough. I think some of the tweets, some of the social media comments from the wide receivers, especially, I know Mazio Bennett had one pretty quickly after the news. I think that kind of speaks volume that this is, I don't know, what do you want to call it? A swing and a miss from Beamer? Is that fair? Like, not the furry part, to be clear, the Coley aspect of it before we get to the new hire.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's any other way to put it. We talked a little bit about, I guess, the bittersweet nature of it too, with Justin Stepp leaving, but we, had this optimism, and yeah, I mean, we will get to Mike Furry in a second. I think you made a good pivot based on the circumstances and stuff, but not great. I think it deepens the dislike for Georgia, for Kirby Smart, and for I guess the rivalry between these two programs, although they don't play every year anymore for some dumb reason. SEC offices, could you please fix that? Even though obviously it's nice to not have Georgia on the schedule for 1 year in their current state, but I mean, fuel to the fire for South Carolina fans that already aren't the biggest fans of Georgia. I mean, I think it's a bad reflection on James Coley too, to be fair. Like I think Shane Beamer went out and got the guy that he thought was best for the job. And then James Coley spent 43 days here and then turned around and left what he deemed a better opportunity, I suppose. Yeah. As far as the recruiting impact, it was kind of funny. Like we had a couple of recent visit articles on GamecockScoop.com earlier this week, and a lot of them, or one of them was a wide receiver, and he was talking about how the conversation with Coley went. And I was like, well, all this part is no longer relevant. I do know, I believe it was Malik Clark. I do know that in the meantime, Beamer reached out to him. I'm sure reached out to other wide receiver recruits. I'm sure there was a little bit of a gathering of communications for the wide receivers that are on campus. And then, yeah, let's turn the page to Mike Furrey. How do you feel about that hire, given the short notice? And how do you think he's going to fit in at South Carolina and as a wide receivers coach?
All right. First of all, this guy's had an unbelievable football life. Like, even just taking the South Carolina part of this aside, I do want to just go through his track record for people who don't know. Starts as a player at Ohio State as a walk-on. He's teammates with Eddie George the year he wins the Heisman Trophy. Orlando Pace is on that team. Some of the greatest NFL players ever. Goes to Northern Iowa because he doesn't have a scholarship at Ohio State. Sets a bunch of FCS records. Undrafted in the NFL. Goes to the XFL, the original one. He is teammates with He Hate Me. That doesn't work out. XFL falls. Goes to the Arena Football League. Sets some records. Gets a gig in the NFL as a defensive player. He plays corner and safety for a couple years. They switch him to offense. He has a 1,000-yard season with the Lions. He was teammates with Dan Campbell, who's now everyone's favorite NFL coach. This guy's just, and that's even before you get into his coaching. 2 years at an NAIA school, 3 years coaching receivers at Marshall, to Limestone then, which is a D2 school in Gaffney, South Carolina, for those who don't know. 4 years with the Chicago Bears, back to Limestone, and now South Carolina. I just want to grab a beer with this guy and hear some of his stories, because I'm sure they've got some pretty insane ones. As for the South Carolina angle, I think going the NFL route again is probably smart. Just going a guy who's in state I think it kind of feels like the anti-James Coley, right? It's an NFL guy instead of a college guy. It's a guy who doesn't have ties to other SEC programs. It's a guy who does have ties to South Carolina. It kind of just feels like they went as far in the other direction as they could after what happened. And I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing. It's just, that's kind of what struck me about it.
Yeah, a little bit. I guess it's like you tried to date the prom queen and she dumped you. So you went to your best friend that you grew up with next door or whatever and asked her to prom instead. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. Having someone that wants to be there, wants to be in the state of South Carolina, has passion for the area, I think goes a long way. And then as far as the storytelling aspect that you mentioned, I actually do think that that's quite useful in recruiting if you can leverage all of that. And it's relatable to a lot of different players that, maybe they're not a 5-star that's destined directly to the NFL or whatever. There's still he's living proof that there are a bunch of different paths if you want to be involved in.
He knows what it's like to be a walk-on. He was one at Ohio State.
Right. As far as the coaching stuff, I thought it was pretty interesting. So he went to the Chicago Bears, like you said, and after some time at Limestone, and then came back to Limestone, and he kind of mentioned that he felt like there was unfinished business coming back to Limestone, and he brought them to the playoffs the last 2 years. So I don't know, as far as just passion, the ability to follow through on your goals, all those sorts of things would have impressed me in an interview room, and I assume impressed Shane Beamer. Obviously, we don't know every detail of that conversation or whatever. I'm interested to see how it plays out. If you draw the direct line of would I rather have Justin Stepp or would I rather have Mike Furrey, that's a tough question. If you put all the circumstances into a blender and kind of follow the track of everything that happened, I think it's a good hire considering all those circumstances and a lot of unknowns. We'll have to see from there.
Yeah, I think that's probably about the right way to go about looking at this. Just with the way it all happened, with the way it put together, the fact that you're hiring a coach 3 weeks before spring ball starts, like you said at the start of the show, a third of that position group in 3 months. I think you did pretty well, but you won't know for sure. There's definitely the recruiting at this level aspect of it that you could say that same thing applied to Sterling Lucas before he got here. Dowell Loggins to a degree, although he had spent 2 years at Arkansas. He's never recruited beyond D2. And I think there's a fair question to be had there. But I think the main point you make that I think is correct is how many different hats he's worn. He's been a head coach. He's been a position coach. He's been a position coach in the NFL. He's been NAIA, D2, and FBS, obviously. I think there's no football scenario you could throw at this guy that he probably hasn't lived, whether that's the XFL or a Rita League or D2 or whatever.
Yeah, and William Dean with the comment on YouTube. Hopefully we just answered that question
Yeah.
about the wide receiver coach. But yeah, just a quick reminder, if you are watching right now and want to throw a comment our way or ask a question, happy to engage. As far as football notes go, I have a few more like recruiting notes and stuff.
I had one more note too on this, by the way.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I don't know if this answers your question, but if you're asked about the old wide receivers coach, I thought it was very interesting. You mentioned someone who wants to be here. The contract this morning that the Board of Trustees dropped, I'm calling it the Coley clause, which has not been in any of the other 4 assistant coach contracts they've signed or approved, this year. Mike Furry's had to make $425,000 a year for 2 years. That's pretty normal for a wide receivers coach. If he terminates it in the next 120 days, it is an $850,000 buyout, which is, almost double the entire length of the contract or double his annual salary. And then it drops to a normal $350 if it's the rest of this year, $250 if it's next year. So they're covering their bases. This guy's not leaving in the next 4 months at least.
Yeah, I guess that's at least going to get you through spring ball and summer camp. And
I thought that was interesting when I saw it. Shane insisted on something like that.
No, yeah. And yeah, my understanding is he definitely had a passion for coaching at Limestone too. So maybe it's just a mitigating. He left and went back a couple times or whatever. But no, Coley clause is probably the most plausible. And then yeah, like I said, I'll have some more recruiting notes on GamecockScoop.com this weekend. I started to mention last weekend on the weekly recruiting wrap up, which you can find if you scroll our news items a little bit. There's a few late May, early June recruiting weekends that are starting to set up with a bunch of official visits, just like there was last summer. And some pretty big name targets already on those lists. Those lists will continue to expand. But that's not the next round of visits. There'll be some visits throughout March and April, as well as spring ball gets going. Some of those guys will come unofficially in the spring and then come again officially in the summer. But if you're starting to look at like who are the biggest targets, I guess that initial list that I put up last week is a good indicator. And we talked a little bit about Ryan Montgomery last week. Nothing really new to add there, but he will visit Georgia, Florida, and South Carolina throughout the spring, as well as he's trying to narrow down between those 3 guys. We've talked a lot already about kind of where his mindset is on those. Let's talk basketball. So last night, South Carolina won their second straight road game. It was a crazy game. Let's go back a little bit first, I guess. Went to Ole Miss, won in pretty dominating fashion against a team that nearly beat you on your home floor. I think the big difference in that one was just if you think back to the near lost Ole Miss at home, one of the big factors was their guards were just knocking down everything, making these crazy jumpers. Despite the fact that South Carolina was playing pretty good defense, and the road trip to Ole Miss played out similarly, except for that the guards weren't knocking down the shots. That was kind of the difference.
And one of them got ejected for throwing an elbow at Zach Davis too.
Yeah, I got ejected, but not suspended.
Not suspended somehow. Yeah,
which I know was a little concerning for those of you on social media and stuff too. I have to agree. Like, you go back and look at the video, it seemed pretty clear. Actually, someone from Ole Miss last night also got ejected or a flagrant 2 or something for another high elbow coming through the lane. So I don't know. Maybe if you suspend a guy, someone will learn a lesson. But maybe not. Anyway, but last night, let's get to that one because that was an insane game. South Carolina ends up with a 70-68 win over Texas A&M. Zach Davis makes a layup with 3 seconds left after who was it from Ole Miss right now? I can't think of it.
Was it Radford from A&M who tied the game?
It wasn't Radford. Whatever.
Wade
doesn't
Taylor?
Matter. It was Taylor, yeah. So Wade Taylor scored with like 9 seconds left to tie the game after they had been going back and forth throughout the second half. And then Zach Davis, of course, puts it away. Texas A&M doesn't really get off a final shot. They had a unfortunate series of events where they kind of set up their final play and then
clock snafu.
Yeah, exactly. Which, hey, that's their home floor. So I'm sure that guy got reamed out after that. But,
yeah.
Anyway, the game was kind of weird. So South Carolina led for the first 30 minutes of it, kind of took control early, but fouls stacked up against South Carolina throughout the game, and it really kind of came to a peak around the 10-minute mark in the second half when BJ Mack picked up his third foul. Zach Davis picked up his third foul, and Colin Murray.
CMB had 4 at that point.
Murray Boyles picked up his 4th, exactly. And so you noticed that they had to be a little bit more careful in defense. A&M, who had been pretty effective at driving all night, started to get a few more open looks or uncontested looks through that, and they went on a 17-1 run, took the lead, and then it just went back and forth crazy from there. It was really, really entertaining game. Especially the last 10 minutes or so. So if you somehow missed it, just go watch the last 10 minutes.
Yeah.
You can also read my recap on GamecockScoop.com. Let's talk bigger picture, though. Or was there anything you wanted to talk about with the game last night?
The only thing I think it's a two-way from last night and Ole Miss. Zach Davis has found the offense. I think we always knew he had defense. I think Lamont's talked about him. Like when NBA scouts ask him about Zach, he always mentions the defense first, but that's 2 games in a row. He set a new career high in scoring. He had 14 at Ole Miss and then 16 last night. He's being more aggressive. You'd still probably like to see a little bit more of an outside shot maybe, but if Zach Davis has the offense, I think that changes things considerably, just how much you can use him and what he can do for you. That's really all I had, other than that was a great game last night.
No, I agree. And even just from a big picture approach, I mean, we've now seen – 6 or 7 different guys lead in scoring. Although I guess Michi last night.
I guess that counts as a takeaway too. Michi Johnson, 22 points last night. That was his biggest game scoring wise in a while.
But yeah, it's just amazing to me how balanced the team is. I guess there tends to be someone to step up any given night. With the exception of maybe Auburn, which we've talked about that before. They ran into a buzzsaw. Put that behind you. And I think they have at this point. All right, Alan, I'm going to talk about it. When else are we going to talk about it? Could South Carolina win the regular season SEC crown? We're 3 games out from the end of the season. South Carolina is currently sitting at 11-4 in the conference. Tennessee and Alabama are both ahead of them at 12-3. But South Carolina is now solely in 3rd place after Auburn lost last night. You got Auburn, Kentucky, Florida, all at 10-5, all obviously still within striking distance. You're not necessarily safe for that first round bye in the SEC tournament yet. Even it's a bit of a cluster, right? Like it feels like any of those teams could finish in first. Any of those teams could finish in 6th right now.
Yeah. All right. Let's set it up that way. Ties still count. You get a ring, you get a banner, you are considered champions. There can be 1 champion, there can be 6. So let's start with that. South Carolina is 1 game out right now. You have Tennessee and Alabama playing each other on Saturday. I know game day is going to be there. That's obviously a huge game. I think you want, I do think you want Tennessee to win that game if you're South Carolina. You need Tennessee and Alabama to both lose again for the regular season title, but you can take care of Tennessee yourself Wednesday when they come here. The Alabama part's the one that's out of your hands. You don't play them again. So if Alabama loses again, which they still also have to go on the road to Gainesville, Bama does on, I think, Tuesday. If Alabama loses a game and South Carolina wins its last 3, you finish tied for first at least, or maybe by yourself if you get other results. Can it happen? Yes. I think we haven't even talked about it yet. Saturday is a huge, huge game, probably the biggest game at CLA in a while for both ends of the spectrum, with Florida coming to town. Florida's behind you, trying to chase you for that double bye. And if you want to win the league title, obviously you pretty much need to win these last three. That's an ESPN game. It's a ranked matchup. It's going to be a big one Saturday.
Yeah, basically Saturday is just a huge game in general, right? You have whatever happens with Alabama, Tennessee, which is going to affect the top of the standings, and then you have whatever happens with South Carolina and Florida, which is going to affect the top of the standings. So when we come back here next week, I think we'll know a lot more. And really, let's see, when's that Tennessee game after
Wednesday,
that Wednesday?
Right?
Yeah. So if South Carolina does win on Saturday, I can guarantee we will have a podcast by Wednesday morning at least, because I would like to talk before we get into all of that. But yeah, I mean, you have 3 games remaining and you're still in the hunt. Did anyone think that was going to be a possibility when you were picked 14th in the SEC preseason? I think there's pretty much no doubt at this point that Lamont Paris is coach of the year. I did hear the broadcast talk about maybe co-coach of the year. Whatever. I mean, deserving. I don't think
in the conference or nationally, because conference should be unanimous, like coach of the year. I suppose you can make an argument nationally with some other guys, but like,
yeah, I can't remember who they said in the conference would be with him. Maybe Florida.
That's insane to me.
Yeah, I agree. And then, yeah, I mean, we were talking yesterday, like right now, Alabama, who has a 1-game better record than you, is projected as a 3 seed in the NCAA tournament. You are projected as a 6 seed right now in the NCAA tournament, although that hasn't been updated since last night. So maybe you bump a little bit more. But it feels like the range of possibilities over these last 3 games are pretty wide, right? You could work your way up, I think, into that maybe 3-ish seed conversation. But I also think you could lose the next 3 and very quickly find yourself back in that 7-8 sort of range. Nonetheless, I think you've pretty much, after these 2 road wins, kind of secured your spot in the field.
Yeah, you're a tournament lock at this point. You've got 5 quad 1 wins. You've got 11 SEC wins on the board. You're going to have, obviously, at least 4 more games. You're going to have 3 in regular season and at least 1 in Nashville to add to that resume. I mean, you don't want to be in that 8-9 range because you're getting a 1 seed in the second round. I can't believe we're even talking about this, like trying to create a bracket path. But you don't want to drop to that 8-9 range just because of what the matchup could be in the second round. 7 seed, that's where you were last time you went to the Final Four. That's not ideal still because you get a 2 seed in the second round, but maybe your 2 seeds North Carolina, and that gets you in Charlotte if you're a 7 seed. There's so many possibilities for seed, for opponent, for location, for all of it. We haven't even talked about the SEC tournament yet, but you've never won that before, and you feel like if you can get that double bye, you have as good a chance as anybody. It's just a really exciting time, and these next 2, I mentioned Florida, but these next 2 home games, really, Florida and Tennessee back-to-back, it's probably the biggest week for the men's team at home and
since 2017.
Yeah, I guess it would have to be. Yeah.
Yeah. No doubt about that. I guess what is your early projection as you're looking ahead to Saturday and that Florida matchup? Obviously, Florida is one of the hottest teams in the country right now. To me, it's all about just the games that you against opponents that are as good or better than you. We've quoted several times the Lamont Paris mindset of if you're 70% as good as a team, he expects to win, sort of thing. When that has worked out successfully, it's whenever you've been able to play at your pace, not get sped up. And then you look at the 2 blowout losses on the season with Alabama and Auburn, and that obviously went the other direction. Do you feel like Florida could speed you up and you end up in a game pace that you don't want, or do you think that this trends that South Carolina could kind of control the pace the way they want to?
Yeah, I think Florida's definitely going to try to do that. I think for me, the interesting thing is Florida's a better version of it. Florida's a tournament team. They're very similar to A&M, especially in terms of like down low. I mean, we talked last night that A&M was 3rd in the country in offensive rebounding. Well, Florida's 1st. They're very good on the glass. They get a lot of their misses back. They're pretty good on the defensive glass too, honestly. I think this is a big Colin Murray-Boyles test, a big BJ Mack test. And I think you saw last night that for all we talk about is passing and everything else, you still, I think in the big games in a tight spot, you still need Michi Johnson to score a little more. You got the 22 from him last night. we didn't even mention his pass in the last play of the game either to Zach Davis. That was a great find in traffic with the double coming his way. But yeah, I think you're going to need to try to slow this thing down. You're going to have to box out really, really well against a team that pretty much nobody does that well against. And yeah, you're trying to play this game about in the 60s, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah, not to bounce around too much, but I guess we didn't talk a ton about Texas A&M. For those of you that haven't been keeping up with them this season, that's a good basketball team. Their record doesn't reflect how good they are, really. They've knocked off Kentucky, Tennessee, and Florida all this year. They just also have lost a lot of games that they shouldn't. And a lot of that is due to some injuries that they had. They were getting a little healthier last night. And to me, they fit the archetype of Florida pretty well. Of a lot of the teams on the top end of the conference, where they had a lot of speed. Their guard play was pretty good, and they were able to penetrate on you in a way that I haven't seen anyone do except for Alabama and Auburn, honestly. I thought you held up obviously much better against A&M than you did Alabama and Auburn, but that the reason that you got in all that foul trouble wasn't that the refs were being too one-sided, although the last foul
on CMB,
that Colin
that wasn't great.
Was bad. But other than that, I mean, no, Texas A&M was doing a really good job of penetrating. You were contesting shots, and fouls happened when that combo happens. As far as that last play with Michi, I thought it was really impressive that Lamont Paris trusted his team.
Yeah, he didn't call timeout. That's a good point.
Go with it, right? So A&M scored with 9 seconds left. A lot of the time, especially in the college game, you're calling a timeout there, drawing up your play, figuring out what you want to do. Instead, he trusted all the veteran leadership on his team, which is definitely there. And Michi went right down the court, and I think a younger Michi, maybe even a last year Michi, forces something up there, is trying to get fouled, whatever. But instead, he sees wide open Zach Davis, makes that extra pass, and it's an easy layup from that standpoint. So yeah, really, really impressive play. I mean, there's so many different aspects of that game last night that I think we could break down, but I don't know. It's a good indication, I think, of the veteran bounce back that this team has had since that pretty tough loss at Auburn, and then the home loss to LSU.
Yeah, and even within the game, I know there's other stuff we need to move on to, but A&M went on a 17-1 run in the middle of the second half yesterday. The offense kind of stalled for about 5-6 minutes. You had a 13-point lead before that, so it wasn't like the game was out of reach or anything once A&M goes on a run, but you hit some big shots. We haven't mentioned Talon Cooper yet, but he hit 2 pretty big threes in the second half. I think he had 8 assists last night too. You got plays from your veterans last night all night, and then it ended up ironically being a sophomore who had the game-winning bucket there.
Yeah. So big noon game on Saturday at home against Florida. I'm sure that the CLA is going to be rocking, and I think that's going to be a factor too, right? That place when there's an important game on the line makes a big impact, and I expect it to on Saturday as well. Let's transition and talk a little bit of women's basketball. There hasn't been a ton of news since we last talked, but South Carolina did clinch the regular season on Sunday the 18th, which I believe is
Thursday.
Since we last talked.
It was the Kentucky game or the Alabama game. What was that? The 21st. The leap day throwing me off.
22nd. Yeah. So it was actually the last time we did a podcast. It was that night. So yeah, South Carolina clinched the SEC regular season. We talked a little bit last week about, that's not something, I know that's something that's become typical around here in the last decade or so, but that's not something from an historical perspective that comes every year. So celebrate that. Then South Carolina scored 100 for the 6th time this season against Kentucky on Sunday. I guess my only takeaway there is it's good to see the offense clicking on all cylinders again after 66 against Tennessee, 70 against Georgia, and 72 against Alabama. And really those Tennessee and Georgia games in particular felt like it could have gone either way until some late runs happened in the second half. So, I mean, good to just see them fully clicking as the calendar is about to turn to March. They have another game tonight at Arkansas. That's at 9 p.m. Eastern.
9.
So those of you that want to stay up and watch them try to score 100 again. And then Sunday, they close out the regular season against Tennessee, and that is also at noon. So big weekend for the men and women, and obviously the baseball series that we're going to get to after this. Any other thoughts on the women? And I guess, did that huge Kentucky win tell you anything, or?
I mean, not a ton, because this is not a very good Kentucky team. I think the main thing that I took from it, Dawn talked about it a little bit yesterday, her availability, was they started fast. They have not done that in a while. They were down in that Tennessee game in Knoxville. They were down 9 into the third quarter against Georgia. They were up at the end of the first quarter against Alabama, but they only scored 11 in the first quarter. You were up 7-0 in less than 2 minutes in Lexington on Sunday. Forced a quick timeout. You had game control. Kentucky never had a foothold in that thing. Again, Kentucky's not very good. That's not even an NIT team, I don't think. But energy, I guess. I think we talked about that on the show last week. This team is young. They haven't played a season this long. They're tired. Maybe that's contributing to some of the slow starts. Well, at least Sunday, you didn't start slow. You had energy. You came out of the blocks quick, and that game was over in about 4 minutes.
Yeah, and I think it's notable that you scored 100 points when you haven't since December. I mean, You've definitely played other inferior opponents in that timeline, and you didn't score 100 against them. So
played Kentucky that timeline.
Yeah, exactly. So, maybe that is not that they. It's hard to say get right game when you're undefeated, but I don't know, for lack of a better term, a little bit of a get right game, because the stakes are about to get a lot higher here in about a week. So
yeah, you got, like you said, you got tonight at Arkansas, you got Sunday against Tennessee, then you get 5 days off after that before the SEC tournament, and then it's postseason time in Greenville next weekend.
Yeah, so obviously we'll have a lot more as all of that starts to shake out. And if you want to stay up with us tonight, I will be covering the women's game at 9 p.m. Eastern on GamecockScoop.com. So come check out the live thread. Usually what happens in these sorts of games is I start to do the math on how they get to 100. So we can do that together. All right. So there's a pretty big baseball series that's supposed to start tomorrow. Like we noted at the beginning of the show, it's supposed to be a little bit rainy throughout the weekend, and tomorrow looks the worst. So we'll probably find out in the next, I don't know, few hours if they're going to make a early call or if they're going to try to just soldier through it. Tomorrow is the home game. Remember, this series kind of travels around. So tomorrow is the home game. Saturday's at Segra Park, which is also Columbia. And then Sunday is at Clemson. So any, I guess, initial thoughts? I know you just came from the Mark Kingston presser that was talking a little bit about this. Sounds like we're going to have the same Sunday starters as last week. Both these teams have the same record at this point. Both of them have a bad loss to an inferior opponent from last weekend, but still ultimately won the series. What's your take right now?
I feel like maybe we said this a little bit last year to a degree, but it kind of feels Spider-Man meme. You know, you're just pointing back at each other like South Carolina and Clemson. Like, we know the deal. We know these teams are both pretty good. They're both ranked, depending on your poll of choice. There's like 5 in college baseball, between like 10 and 20 in the country right now. Neither one's played great competition yet. Neither one's been on the road yet. This is going to be where you figure out for real what this team has so far. I think the Clemson people are probably saying the same thing. It's so hard. It kind of feels like you're flying blind going into this, just not having seen either team face any remote competition at this level. But I think you feel pretty good if you're South Carolina. The pitching depths look good. Going with the same rotation, like you said, you're going Jones, Eskew, Kimball again. Other than that Saturday game, which kind of got away from you in the late innings last weekend, you pitched well again. You pitched well in the midweek on Tuesday against Gardner-Webb. You only gave up 1 run in that game. I think you feel better about the pitching than we thought, and this offense is still doing what we thought they would.
Yeah. So, like you said, both teams have the ability to put up some pretty gaudy box scores offensively. Both teams have pretty solid starting pitching with like highly recruited bullpens that are still a lot of them haven't been tested against this level of competition yet. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. I guess my big question, and I don't know if they talked about it in the press conference at all today. First of all, if for those of those South Carolina fans that this is the first series that you really start to pay attention to baseball of the year, who are our proposed 3 starters?
Yep, that's going to be Eli Jones on Friday, Dylan Eskew on Saturday, and Roman Kimball, if you're new here, who you haven't seen pitch yet, then the Notre Dame transfer who was hurt last year is going on Sunday.
Okay, and so that was my follow-up question is how many innings do you think that they push Kimball now that the opponent is, I mean, assuming he's pitching well, obviously.
Right.
His first 2 starts, he's gone like 2 innings the first start and
4 last week.
Yeah, so 4 sounds kind of about right to me. Maybe if he gets out of them pretty quickly, you push it 1 more. I guess just how do you foresee that going?
So I asked Roman today, actually, at the presser, if he was on a pitch count. He said he hasn't been told that. I would assume they're obviously still going to keep this close or keep this, not let him go 100 pitches, anything like that. But he did say last week, coming off the mound, he threw 65 pitches Sunday against Belmont, 4 innings, only gave up 1 hit. That he felt good, like he felt like he'd go back out there, which I think is a good sign. And I think at that point, the other angle on this too is if they don't play tomorrow, and I asked Mark this too, and he just kind of shrugged it off. She said he doesn't know. If they don't play tomorrow and you only have to manage your pitching for 2 games this weekend, not 3, you can be a little more cautious with Kimball. You'll have more bullpen options on Sunday being game 2 of a series and game 3. Maybe you push Eli Jones to Saturday. Maybe Kimball doesn't pitch at all this weekend if that happens. Maybe it's Jones and Eskew. Maybe Kimball goes out of the bullpen. You're going to have all hands on deck for Clemson. I mean, this matters more than the midweeks next week, the Longwood next weekend. This matters more than anything other than your SEC weekends, which still aren't until another 2 weeks. So if you only end up playing 2 games, I think you can kind of get creative with Kimball, which I know isn't exactly what you asked, but I think it's a factor here.
Yeah, I also, even if they do play 3 games, I wonder if that's a rubber match or if you somehow wrap up the series one way or another
that's
on Friday, Saturday. That's going to make a big difference. But yeah, I mean, I still think arguably your best pitcher from a talent perspective. He's pitched 6 innings and has 8 strikeouts so far. Has given up 2 hits total, I think.
Yep.
So he's got good stuff, and I think it would be nice to be able to lean on him a little bit on Sunday should that be a deciding game. So good. It sounds like at the very least you could get 4 or 5 innings out of him, and then you feel pretty good about the bullpen and the way that it's been working behind him on Sunday thus far. Again, they haven't faced a full weekend of the sort of hitters that they're going to see this weekend either. So we'll see how that bullpen looks on Sunday. But
yeah, I think there's the other side of this too. I mean, Sunday right now, Clemson, the kid's name is Aiden Kanak, I think is how you pronounce it. He's a freshman. He pitched very well last week. 6 innings shutout against Kennesaw State, but still, if you're starting a freshman on Sunday, if he gets nervous, if it's a rivalry game, he's never faced a lineup like this. Is Sunday a day your offense might be able to get going a little bit against Clemson? Does he still pitch Sunday if they don't play Friday? There's so many different possibilities just with the weather the way it is right now. But I think I'm going to say, I mean, this could go back to bite me. If they play 3 games this weekend, South Carolina wins the series. I think you take 2 out of 3. I think you feel a little bit better about your pitching. If you play 3, that means you're playing a home game Friday to get started. I think you feel good about Eli Jones on a Friday right now. And then you find a way to win 1 more. But also, if they only play 2, I think a split's probably fair because I think these teams are pretty similar.
Sorry if I'm putting you on the spot, but do you know if Clemson has already announced their starters for the weekend?
Yes, they have. It is going to be Billy Barlow, whose numbers don't look great, but I know he also is ramping up from an injury from last year on Friday. Tristan Smith on Saturday. He pitched very well against South Carolina last year. I think it was 4 or 5 shutout innings in that Saturday game. And then the freshman Kanak on Sunday.
Yeah, so Barlow is the one loss of the season for Clemson was last Friday against Kennesaw State, and he pitched 2 innings and gave up 8 hits and 5 earned runs. So, that's something to watch for tomorrow, assuming that game does happen. See how he bounces back after getting rattled so hard in his last start. But
I think you feel good about tomorrow, or if that first matchup, whether that's tomorrow or Saturday, being Jones and Barlow, you like your offense in that game, I think.
No, yeah, agreed. Yeah, and then I guess if you're just looking at South Carolina's offensive depth, we've talked a little bit about it already throughout the season, but it's been very consistent across the board. Even your non-power guys like a Will Tippett or a Talmadge LeCroy are battling at the plate, making most at bats very tough. You are I have to imagine that you're near the top of the country in walks at this
You
point.
are leading right now. Yep.
Yeah. So I'm really interested. I think everyone obviously is very interested to see how it stacks up against another ranked opponent.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the main thing here is you're trying to see how much of this translates, what can kind of take, how you respond from getting punched in the mouth, because you did lose a game to Belmont, but I think you still felt pretty good about winning that series the next day. What happens if there's some in-game adversity? What happens if you lose Friday or Saturday? Yeah, I think this is – I'm not going to call it opening day because you've played 9 games already, 55-game season, and that's almost 20%. But it does kind of feel like the unofficial start of baseball season this weekend. You got one more weekend after this where you're kind of back into that non-con weaker opponent, and then it's SEC play from there on in.
Yeah, so this is the first of like 3 or 4 straight very busy weekends on GamecockScoop.com. I don't say that with any sort of complaint. I'm excited. It's going to be really
it's going to be good
for the next month. So come check us out on GamecockScoop.com. If you're a premium subscriber, we will have live threads for every single one of these games. You can come hang out, ask questions, post comments.
If you see me at Segra Saturday, I'm told the press box there is not big enough for the whole media, so they do tables in the concourse. If you're at the game at Segra, I'll probably be hanging out in the concourse and come say hi.
Yeah, and why are you getting there late, Alan?
Because of a men's basketball game Saturday afternoon against Florida.
Pretty big one, yeah. No, appreciate you doing the double header there, and I'll be around all day Saturday for those of you that want to talk basketball or baseball as well. All right. In the meantime, this has been the GamecockScoop.com podcast. We'll be back here next week, and we'll see you.